In WWE, superstars have taken several paths towards becoming a world champion. For some, it's by outlasting 29 other men in a Royal Rumble match. For others, their fan support is used to push them up the card as legions of fans rally behind them. But for a certain few, the only thing standing in their way of becoming champion is the inability to survive a grueling ladder match to grab the most important briefcase in the WWE, the Money in the Bank briefcase. By winning this prize, you are able to cash in on any champion at any time and compete for their title, and many have used it to become a top star, while some have shockingly seen the briefcase as a hindrance to their career. My name is Grisha from Wrestleology, and today let us go through every single winner of the Money in the Bank ladder match to see who used this briefcase to climb the ladder of success in WWE. Kicking us off, we have the man who's almost been defined by the briefcase itself, Edge. The first man to win the ladder match back at WrestleMania 21, Edge was quickly rising in popularity around this time, with this moment kicking off a sudden transformation into a lifelong main eventer. During his time with the briefcase, Edge's character had evolved into a sleazy opportunist, as his act alongside Lita quickly became the biggest thing on Raw. But fans throughout this year were left wondering when or how Edge would cash in this briefcase. Being the first winner of his kind, fans just didn't know exactly how Edge was going to use this massive opportunity. But we got our answer at New Year's Revolution just a week into 2006, because following a grueling championship defense inside the Elimination Chamber, John Cena was left a bloody mess in the middle of the ring. And seeing this, Edge took the opportunity of a lifetime by handing Vince McMahon the briefcase at the top of the ramp and cashing it in, and there, Edge beat Cena and cemented his legacy by becoming WWE Champion. And while his reign with the title left a lot to be desired, this moment forced Edge into the main event picture. Off the back of his cash-in, Edge would continue to win world championships and establish a Hall of Fame career as the ultimate opportunist. But while Edge was flying high, Rob Van Dam's time with the briefcase would only end in controversy for his own high flying. At WrestleMania 22, Rob Van Dam won the briefcase in a moment that fans had been clamoring for since Van Dam's arrival in the company. This exciting ECW original had won over the hearts of fans since even before entering the WWE. And he knew this. He knew that fans felt a strong bond for him, especially the ECW audience. So when everyone got wind that there would be a second ECW One Night Stand show for 2006, Rob knew that that would be the best environment for him to cash in the briefcase. So he announced that he would take on John Cena for the WWE Championship at that event. And during this now iconic match, Van Dam used his home court advantage to become WWE Champion. Sadly though, like Edge before, Rob's run with the WWE title left many fans disappointed. Just as the biggest title run of his life was heating up, Rob got busted for drug possession and was suspended, losing both the WWE title and the newly recreated ECW title in just a matter of days. And this also sadly seems to be the peak of Rob Van Dam's career in the WWE. But hey, at least he got to cash in his briefcase, unlike the next Money in the Bank winner, Mr. Kennedy. And his story is one of the most tragic ones of all time, in my opinion, because at WrestleMania 23, Kennedy outlasted some of the most wild competitors in the WWE at the time to capture the briefcase. However, on May 7th, 2007 episode of Raw, he defended and lost the Money in the Bank briefcase to Edge. Why? Well, it was reported that Kennedy had actually suffered an injury before the episode, and he would be forced to lose the briefcase in this match against Edge. But while Kennedy would end up finding out that his injury was far less severe than originally thought, he will still go down in history as the first man to lose the briefcase without even cashing it in. Edge, meanwhile, didn't hesitate as he cashed in that very same week on SmackDown to defeat The Undertaker for the World Heavyweight Championship. It's just crazy to me knowing that Mr. Kennedy was actually supposed to be the guy to beat The Undertaker for the World Heavyweight title, and this little hiccup in the misdiagnosis of his injury kind of just ruined his entire momentum as he never gained it back. However, despite Edge also having a good run as champion with high-profile defenses against Batista under his belt, Edge would unfortunately later on be forced to drop this World Heavyweight Championship due to a torn pectoral muscle. So yeah, the previous year, that briefcase was definitely cursed with injury. However, with our following winner, he would unfortunately take the briefcase back to the days of disappointment after CM Punk won the briefcase at WrestleMania 24. Tour. A few months following the win, Punk cashed in his briefcase on Edge to become the new World Heavyweight Champion, and Punk was quickly rising in popularity around this time, but like with the rest of his career, the higher-ups in the WWE failed to believe in him as a champion. I mean, the guy lost his first World Championship without even defending it in the match that he lost it in. Before a championship scramble match featuring the likes of Batista, Kane, JBL, and Rey Mysterio, Punk was attacked backstage by the Legacy faction. Because of this attack, Punk was unable to defend his title and was instead replaced by Chris Jericho, who won the title in his place. But Punk did get another chance at being world champion the following year, as he became the first person to ever win the Money in the Bank ladder match twice. Following his win at WrestleMania 25, Punk would go on to cash in following Jeff Hardy's successful title win over Edge in the main event of that year's Extreme Rules pay-per-view. And following this, Punk and Hardy would begin to feud over the title in arguably the best feud of this entire year. Punk, through this rivalry, turned heel on Jeff and would mock him for his checkered past of drug and alcohol abuse, and Punk even defeated Jeff in a steel cage match on SmackDown that resulted in Jeff leaving the company for almost a decade. This heel turn would continue to spark a new life into Punk, as he would form the Straight Edge Society soon after and would continue his trajectory towards becoming the top star of WWE. But while WWE actively seemed to dislike Punk's rise in popularity, WWE did have another handpicked star for the future, one with a legitimate wrestling background that he used to overcome many obstacles over his short career, the All-American American himself, Jack Swagger. Yes, at WrestleMania 26, Swagger won the Money in the Bank ladder match before cashing in literally the same week on a beaten down Chris Jericho to become the World Heavyweight Champion. But this reign with the title did much more harm than good for Swagger, as fans instantly saw the flaws in the world champion. Swagger's reign, to put it bluntly, was one of the most boring runs in the title's history, and when he lost the title to Rey Mysterio at Fatal 4-Way a few months later, the audience were happy simply to have a different world champion, and Swagger's time in the main event scene was over that very night. He went on to have some different types of gimmicks, including the We the People gimmick, which kinda got over a little bit, but he never really held world championship gold again after that. Swagger, however, wasn't the only man to win the Money in the Bank briefcase that year. You see, following WrestleMania 26, WWE announced that the Money in the Bank pay-per-view would begin, and the traditionally WrestleMania only match would move over to that event. Not only that, but with this pay-per-view came two separate ladder matches, one for Raw and one for SmackDown. For Raw, it was The Miz who won the briefcase. For SmackDown, it was Kane. For The Miz, he had a rather successful run with the briefcase before cashing in on Randy Orton on the November 22 episode of Raw, and as the new WWE champion, The Miz's annoying character was dialed up to 11, as he would become a complete nuisance to the show. Through the support of Michael Cole and The Miz's personal assistant, Alex Riley, who by the way had one of the best entrance theme songs of all time, Miz easily became the most hated wrestler on Raw. He even main evented WrestleMania as WWE champion, retaining the title because of The Rock's personal rivalry with John Cena, who was The Miz's opponent that year. Throughout his reign, he would continuously steal victories like a sleazy heel should, until finally dropping the title to Cena at Extreme Rules 2011 in a triple threat steel cage match, which also featured Miz's frenemy John Morrison. As for Kane though, well, he didn't really wait around to cash in his briefcase. No, unlike The Miz, the Devil's Favorite Demon decided to take a direct approach by cashing in the briefcase that very same night on Rey Mysterio. This made Kane the first wrestler in WWE history to win the WWE Championship, the ECW Championship, and the World Heavyweight Championship. He was also obviously the first wrestler to ever cash in the Money in the Bank briefcase the same night that he won it. This then launched him into a feud with Rey before turning his attention to his own brother in The Undertaker. And while this part of their lifelong rivalry might be a bit boring for the fans, there were some interesting highlights as they fought for the title, most notably the return of Paul Bearer, who actually joined Kane during his run. However, after definitively defeating the Dead Man at bragging rights in a Buried Alive match, Kane moved on to a feud with Edge that concluded in Edge once again becoming World Heavyweight Champion at TLC. But now we get to the big one, Money in the Bank 2011. For wrestling fans of a certain age, this was perhaps the defining wrestling event of their time, with everyone remembering the main event barn burner between CM Punk and John Cena. I'm not gonna lie, this is definitely in my top 5 pay-per-views of all time that I've ever seen. However, the show did also have a few ladder matches to go along with that main event, with Daniel Bryan winning the SmackDown Money in the Bank briefcase and Alberto Del Rio winning the Raw one. For SmackDown's winner, Bryan chose to go to a more noble route by announcing that he would cash in his briefcase at WrestleMania. However, of course, Bryan couldn't help himself when the opportunity arose. Following a beatdown by the Big Show, the World Heavyweight Champ Mark Henry was left in the ring, and Bryan took advantage by cashing in and beating the world's strongest man. And this one was actually quite beneficial for Bryan, as fans now got a chance to see what he could do as an actual main eventer on SmackDown. They even got to see what he could do as an actor rather than a wrestler, with his on-screen relationship with AJ Lee taking shape during this run. This reign also sparked a heel turn for Bryan, which, as fans would remember from his days in Ring of Honor, is a position that he's very comfortable in. However, as you all know, Bryan would end up losing his championship to Sheamus at WrestleMania 28 in one of the biggest letdowns in Mania history. Following a kiss from AJ Lee, Bryan turned around into a bro kick to lose his title in a matter of 18 seconds. 10-year-old me actually attended this event, and since this was the first match of the card, I remember people getting there a little bit late and wondering what happened to this match, and explaining to a couple people that yeah, it was literally only 18 seconds. But that loss would actually be very beneficial in hindsight, as this bit of poor booking forced fans into action, as through this run with the title, Bryan had proven to be a favorite for the smarter sections of the audience, and thus the early stages of the Yes movement can all be traced back to Bryan's time as Mr. Money in the Bank. Alberto, meanwhile, had a much less exciting run with the briefcase and a subsequent title reign. You see, Del Rio was put in the tough position of being Mr. Money in the Bank during the summer of Punk, which means that anyone who said opposite of the Second City Saint was going to be met with disgust by the fans, especially if they were WWE champion instead of Punk. But nonetheless, Del Rio did end up winning the title after cashing in his briefcase at SummerSlam 2011 due to Punk getting attacked by Kevin Nash. But his run wouldn't last very long, as he would lose the title a month later to John Cena at Night of Champions before the title eventually made its way over to Punk a few months after. But now we move on to 2012, where two of the most important Money in the Bank ladder matches in company history took place. And that's because of what followed, with each man's cash-in being rather notable. Firstly, we'll talk about John Cena, who won the Money in the Bank ladder match for a shot at the WWE Championship. But what makes this so notable? Well, it's because John Cena was actually the first person to ever lose his cash-in attempt. You see, Cena announced his cash-in for the 1000th episode of Raw, where he would rekindle his rivalry with then champ CM Punk. The two went to war during this battle for the title, but ultimately, Cena was unable to win due to the interference of Big Show. Sure, Cena would be fine following this loss, as it didn't really hurt his reputation in any way. However, with this loss, fans now had to sit back and realize that someone losing their cash-in is actually a real possibility, which of course made Dolph Ziggler's cash-in even more memorable. Ziggler, the other man in 2012 to win the briefcase, cashed in for a shot at Alberto Del Rio's World Heavyweight Championship in one of the loudest moments in Raw history. Fans were drawn to Ziggler, with him easily being one of the most popular stars in the company, so when he cashed in and we saw that Alberto actually had a chance of winning, fans were on the edge of their seat in a mix of fear and excitement. But after a few close calls, Ziggler finally got the one-up on Alberto to win the championship, and while this moment became the peak moment of his career, with Ziggler's reign only lasting a few weeks due to injury, fans will always be able to look back on the night after WrestleMania 29 as Ziggler's moment of triumph. This was also my second favorite cash-in of all time. And just like 2012, 2013 saw two very notable winners of the Money in the Bank briefcase in the forms of Damien Sandow and Randy Orton. For Sandow, unfortunately, he would end up being a sad combination of the two prior winners of the briefcase, because not only did he lose his cash-in, ironically enough, to John Cena himself, but like Ziggler, that cash-in became the biggest moment of his career. Sandow had gotten over with the fans around this time as being the intellectual savior of the masses, but that gimmick sadly had a pretty low ceiling according to WWE, so like Cena, he lost his shot at becoming world champion. I remember being really upset at this even back then when I was much younger, and now looking back on it, it still kind of pains me. Like, he had that beautiful feud with Cody Rhodes, he had his own briefcase that fit his gimmick, everything seemed to point in the direction of Damien Sandow taking that next step towards the main event, and unfortunately for some reason we never got it, as Cena beat him with literally one arm. Randy Orton, meanwhile, had already been a top champion several times over. Hell, he was the second biggest guy in the company alongside John Cena at the time, but perhaps that position as second best drove him into having one of the most most despicable cash-ins in company history. After Daniel Bryan finally became the top star in the company by defeating John Cena clean at SummerSlam, the moment would soon be ruined with Orton coming down to tease the cash-in. However, in a shocking twist, the special referee Triple H attacked Bryan and hit him with a pedigree. Orton swooped in, pinned Bryan, and became the new WWE Champion. And this run was monumental because this started the formation of the Authority faction, with Triple H and Stephanie McMahon leading the charge as Orton continued trading his title back and forth with Bryan over the coming months. During his reign, Orton was also able to beat Cena to unify the WWE and World Heavyweight titles, but at the end of WrestleMania 30, Orton would lose those belts to the new top star in the WWE, Daniel Bryan himself, in one of the greatest moments in WrestleMania history. But while the Authority suffered a major loss with Bryan becoming the new face of the company, they were still able to keep their momentum with their newly added member in Seth Rollins. After betraying his fellow Shield mates Roman and Dean, Seth quickly stood out as the high-profile member of his new stable. He quickly became Mr. Money in the Bank just a month after joining, and he held the briefcase until he was able to finally cash in one of the biggest moments of the entire last decade. During the WrestleMania 31 main event between Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, Seth ran down to the ring and cashed in to turn the main event of WrestleMania into a triple threat match. In the Heist of the century, Seth walked into WrestleMania with just a briefcase of dreams and left as the top star in the company with his newly won WWE World Heavyweight Championship. This was by far the greatest cash-in of all time, and his run was actually absolutely terrific. Despite it being cut short due to injury, Seth held the company on his back with impressive performances throughout the year against the likes of John Cena, Randy Orton, and even Sting. And who can forget him holding the WWE title and the United States title at the same time? But while Seth was acting as the biggest star in WWE, in 2015 it would surprisingly be Sheamus who won that very same briefcase that brought Seth to the top. He waited for months for a perfect opportunity to cash in, and he got it at Survivor Series. Following Seth's injury, a tournament was held to crown a new WWE champion, and in the finals of the tournament, Roman Reigns and his best friend Dean Ambrose went to war over the belt, with Roman picking up the win to finally be crowned WWE champion. But his celebration didn't last very long, as Sheamus cashed in to rip the title away from the big dog, but Sheamus would just end up losing the title back to Roman just a few weeks later. This was just a really weird time where Roman Reigns was basically being pushed down the fans' throats, and the fans didn't really like Sheamus either, but it was like the lesser of two evils. Either way, I'd say both guys are doing pretty well nowadays. But now that Roman and Seth both won the WWE title, fans were focusing their attention on the third member of the Shield, Dean Ambrose. We all sat back watching Ambrose, wondering when he'd finally join them to become WWE champion, and well, at Money in the Bank 2016, Ambrose finally got his chance at the top. After winning the briefcase earlier in the night, Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns actually battled in the main event over the WWE Championship, and Seth, coming in as the challenger, beat Roman for the title. That is, before Ambrose ran down and successfully cashed in the briefcase, marking Money in the Bank 2016 as the night when all three former members of the Shield held the WWE Championship. And Dean's reign, while a bit short in comparison to his Shield counterparts, was memorable for a few reasons. For one, while his feud with AJ Styles over the title was a bit odd with the inclusion of James Ellsworth, it really said a lot about Dean's character, or rather what management at the time saw him as. And this run was also notable as Dean was the WWE Champion leading into the newly revamped brand split. Sure, SmackDown became the house that AJ Styles built after he took the title off of Ambrose, but Dean went into the brand as its foundational WWE champion. And I just remember SmackDown 2016 being literally like one of the greatest periods in wrestling. It was such a good show, man. But following this monumental moment in WWE history, the company decided to revert back to the two ladder match system for the following Money in the Bank pay-per-view. But this time, instead of them being brand-oriented briefcases, the two winners were based on their gender, as this year also marked the first women's Money in the Bank ladder match, which bizarrely was initially won by James Ellsworth. The very first women's Money in the Bank ladder match was won by a man. Well, before he handed the briefcase to Carmella, of course. But this bizarre piece of booking would actually be doubled down on a following episode of SmackDown when they would hold the second all-women's Money in the Bank ladder match. And even though she would actually capture the briefcase herself this time, Carmella was still the one who left as the first official Miss Money in the Bank. And for nearly a year, she would continue to remind us of this, with her waiting 287 days before before cashing in the briefcase on a previously attacked Charlotte Flair to win the SmackDown Women's Championship. Her run would see her get some notable wins over stars like Asuka and Charlotte, mind you via some questionable tactics, before she ultimately lost the belt at SummerSlam. As for the men's side, well, this star-studded year of winners saw Baron Corbin win the briefcase, and yes, I say that with as much sarcasm as possible, because after months of teasing, Corbin finally picked his moment on the August 15th, 2017 episode of SmackDown Live during a match between John Cena and the WWE Champion Jinder Mahal. Corbin actually attacked Cena and threw him out as Mahal was left lying in the ring. Corbin then cashed in his Money in the Bank contract on Mahal, but was unable to pick up the win due to the distraction of Cena at ringside. So yeah, John Cena was involved in the first 3 failed Money in the Bank cash-ins. But that Cena-centric curse would end up changing in 2018 with a surprising failure in Money in the Bank history, Braun Strowman. You see, in 2018, Braun Strowman was easily one of the most over superstars in the WWE. His antics of ripping down sets and tipping over ambulances made fans excited to see what the Monster Among Men would do next. So, when he won the ladder match that year, fans were actually excited at the thought of him becoming world champion, unlike the prior year's winner. So it did come as a shock that at Hell in a Cell, Strowman was unsuccessful in taking home the Universal Championship, especially with how he lost. During the pre-announced main event Hell in a Cell match between Reigns and Braun, Brock Lesnar entered the cage after building up a rivalry with both men over the prior few months, and he F5'd both guys, leading to the referee stopping the match. Yeah, because Brock came in and wiped everyone out, the ref stopped the match. The Hell in a Cell match. A match built as the ultimate playhouse of destruction with no rules and shortened careers, advertised as a part of the attraction of the match, and then the year after, they thought that this incredibly frustrating and unsatisfying end was so great that they actually recreated it in the dumpster fire Seth Rollins versus The Fiend main event. If you want to know more about The Fiend and Bray Wyatt and his whole fiasco in the WWE, which led to him having a not so great career, go ahead and check out this video right here. However, to escape a full-blown rant that won't do anything but just make my blood boil, why don't we take a look at who won the Miss Money in the Bank briefcase that year? And hey, it's a woman who has a lot of history with both The Fiend and Braun Strowman. Because in 2018, the woman to leave with the briefcase was none other than Alexa Bliss. But Bliss didn't wait around to cash in a briefcase. As the start of a bizarre pattern with the women's briefcase, Alexa cashed in that very same night on Nia Jax to win the Raw Women's Championship, and she would end up defeating Jax the following month at Extreme Rules to retain before ultimately dropping the title to Ronda Rousey at SummerSlam. But that trend would only continue leading into next year, as 2019's winner Bayley followed in Alexa's footsteps by cashing in her newly won briefcase on the SmackDown Women's Champion Charlotte that very same night again. Perhaps she was just eager to become the first WWE Women's Grand Slam winner, or perhaps she knew just how monumental this reign would be for her career. Not only did she defeat some of the best athletes in WWE such as Charlotte, Alexa Bliss, and Ember Moon, but Bayley also found herself going down a completely new route character-wise. Bayley would shockingly join forces with Sasha Banks, her career-long rival and friend, in an attack on Becky Lynch on the September 2nd episode of Raw. Thus, Bayley turned heel for the first time in her WWE career, and while she may have lost the title back to Charlotte a few months later at Hell in a Cell, this heel turn has completely altered fans' perspective on Bayley, and she has been forever changed since turning her back on the audience. But what about the men's ladder match that year? Well, that one had a truly unexpected winner that nobody would have seen coming. Why? Well, because Brock Lesnar wasn't even announced for the match yet still left the show as Mr. Money in the Bank. Yes, because even if you're not announced for the match, just as we saw with James Ellsworth a few years prior, nothing is stopping you from just grabbing the briefcase yourself. Either way, after a few meme-worthy moments of Boombox Brock with the briefcase, the Beast finally cashed in on Seth Rollins at the Extreme Rules event to once again become the Universal Champion. However, this run would ultimately be pointless as Brock dropped the title back to Rollins at SummerSlam just a few weeks later. Why someone like Drew McIntyre, Finn Balor, or even Ali couldn't win the match, I have no idea, but with Lesnar's run with the briefcase becoming so pointless so quickly after cashing in, you have to question just what the reason behind all this was. Especially since I don't think Brock had any problems with getting into the main event picture around this time. Nonetheless, the show must go on, and that quote couldn't ring any truer for our next few winners. You see, now we're heading into the 2020 Money in the Bank ladder match, and this one is very special. Due to the pandemic, you know, the one keeping everyone at home, WWE struggled to keep any sort of momentum going. So they started experimenting, and the Money in the Bank ladder match was a very big experiment indeed. This year, taking place in WWE's corporate home Titan Towers, superstars raced to the roof of the building where a ring had been set up, and there, both the men's and women's briefcases hung above, with both matches happening simultaneously. After a match filled with hilarious shenanigans like Baron Corbin attempting to kill both Rey Mysterio and Aleister Black by throwing them off a building, both Asuka and Otis would end up winning their respective briefcases. For Asuka though, the surprises didn't really stop coming. Instead of cashing in like one would traditionally do, it was revealed that the Raw Women's title was actually inside the briefcase all along. You see, the then champion Becky Lynch had recently found out that she was pregnant and thus couldn't continue defending her title, and because of this, Becky simply handed off the title to Asuka for winning the match. From there, Asuka would defend the title with pride. She defended her title against the likes of Nia Jax and Charlotte before losing it to Sasha on Raw a few months later. That is, before recapturing the gold from Sasha at SummerSlam after losing to Sasha's partner Bayley earlier in the night. This would kick off a 231-day reign that saw Asuka continue to dominate the red brand before finally losing her belt to Rhea Ripley at WrestleMania 37. As for Otis, well, his run with the briefcase wasn't so successful. Otis, for all intent and purposes, is a comedy act, so the idea of him becoming WWE champion seemed rather unlikely from the start, and after putting his Money in the Bank contract on the line at Hell in a Cell, fans weren't really that surprised when he lost it to The Miz after being hit over the head with a briefcase by his longtime partner Tucker. And as those two would go off on their own separate story before Tucker's eventual release from the company, The Miz would continue to hold on to his newly won Money in the Bank briefcase, and he would actually successfully cash it in like he did all the way back in 2010 on a beaten down Drew McIntyre at Elimination Chamber. That is, until we found out that he was going to be a transitional champion because he would lose the title soon to Bobby Lashley just a week later on Raw. But after the unique mess that was the 2020 Money in the Bank pay-per-view, 2021 brought us back to the show's exciting tone as fans returned in droves to watch the spectacle. And they were not disappointed as fan favorites Big E and Nikki A.S.H won their respective briefcases to the delight of the crowd. The following night on Raw, Nikki cashed in her briefcase on Charlotte to win the Raw Women's Championship for the first time in her career. However, this joyous moment for Nikki was short-lived as she quickly dropped the title back to Charlotte at SummerSlam only a few weeks later. But while Nikki's run with the title was a little bit disappointing, so too was her male counterparts. Sure, while many didn't really expect Nikki A.S.H to have an incredible run with the gold, Big E's run as a top champion was one that fans have been itching for nearly a decade. Ever since joining WWE, Big E was over with the WWE universe, whether as a muscle-bound behemoth like in the early days of his career, or as a hilarious member of New Day. So when he won the WWE title for the first time, fans were excited to see what could happen next. Well, unfortunately, his run ended up being way too short and way too forgettable for what the fans expected. After successfully defeating Bobby Lashley to win the WWE Championship, the New Day were immediately separated in the draft, a dark omen for things to come. He then continued losing on Raw in non-televised outings, while still remaining champion across a few months, and his title defenses saw him defeat Drew McIntyre and Austin Theory before losing it, of course, to Brock Lesnar. This reign, like Kofi's, felt underwhelming with a lack of interesting storylines and high-profile opponents, and not to mention again, like Kofi's run with the belt, he always played second fiddle to the true top star in the company, Roman Reigns. And this trend of disappointing Money in the Bank winners would unfortunately continue leading into 2022. For the women's match, it was Liv Morgan who climbed the ladder to win the match, but like so many of the other Miss Money in the Banks before her, Liv cashed in her briefcase that same night on Ronda Rousey to win the SmackDown Women's title. Morgan by this point was completely over with the crowd through her impressive work thus far in her career, so it was unfortunate when this reign ended up exposing Liv as perhaps not being quite ready for the title. With disappointing matches against Ronda Rousey multiple pay-per-views in a row, fan hype around Liv quickly died down. As for the men's match, it was Austin Theory who won the briefcase. And with the briefcase, Theory really shined as this annoying heel character. He continuously teased the cash-in for months on the WWE, Universal, and even NXT champions. But what actually ended up happening was one of the weirdest, most dumb moments in Money in the Bank history, in my opinion, because Seth Rollins, who was the United States champion, called an open challenge on an episode of Raw, which Austin Theory answered by cashing in his Money in the Bank briefcase on an open challenge on a mid-card title. And not only that, he lost due to an interference from Bobby Lashley, marking yet another loss in the Money in the Bank lineage, yet also marking the first attempted cash-in on a non-main event level title. But then again, Theory ended up winning the title at Survivor Series War Games in a reign that he still is on till this very day. And then we get to Money in the Bank 2023, which at the recording of this video has not happened yet. But I really do hope that LA Knight wins this match and holds the briefcase for a little while in order to kind of make it a beacon of his personality. If not LA Knight, I could see them giving it to Logan Paul, but I really hope LA Knight wins it. I'll probably put a pop-up on the screen of the actual winner of the men's ladder match in 2023. As for the women, word on the street is that Io Sky is going to win, which I would be very happy with. And honestly, I wouldn't even mind if somebody like a Zoe Stark won it, even though it might be too early. Just please, WWE, do not give the briefcase to Trish Stratus. When looking back at the full history of the Money in the Bank briefcase, you can see that it's a very mixed bag. While most of the men and women who won the match ended up as world champion, it's hard to say that many of those runs have even been successful. Sure, Edge became a legend off the back of the briefcase. Sure, the Heist of the Century turned Seth Rollins into an instant main eventer, but really, it's hard to point any other huge successes in the briefcase lineage. CM Punk first saw the beginning of his success after winning it, but he really became a megastar after dropping the pipe bomb promo years after his runs with a briefcase. Rob Van Dam's time as WWE champion died the second he heard police sirens. The Miz has been relegated to a mid-card player despite his cash-in for over a decade now, just like many other winners like Dolph Ziggler, Theory, Liv Morgan, Jack Swagger, Bayley, and many more, honestly. Does it have the chance to turn a wrestler into a megastar? Yeah, sure. And I could definitely see it doing so again, but the track record of the briefcase is so checkered that at this point, you really don't know what will happen next. If you enjoyed, make sure to go ahead and leave a like on the video and subscribe to not miss the next video. Thank you so much for watching.